Button on, right?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, you are recording. Okay, perfect. All right. So at this time, we'll call it 4:06. I'll call to order the Board of Public Works meeting for March 30th, 2021. And before we get started, I'll ask if anyone besides Bruce, who's recording the meeting through Zoom, is recording the meeting. And if so, please state your name. Okay, hearing none, we'll get right into it then. So the first item on the agenda is to review and approve the minutes of the meeting from January 26, 2021. So I'll take a motion if you guys have had a chance to review them. I know Bruce sent them out ahead of time.
Make a motion.
Go ahead. Tom,
All right.
go ahead.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
All right. All right. Tom made the motion. Phil seconded it. All in favor, Tom?
Aye.
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
And I'm also an aye. All right, thanks, gentlemen. And over to the superintendent report. Bruce.
Okay, I'll try to keep it brief. We got a lot to do this evening with the rates and fees. A brief staffing update. As of March 29th, we have finally filled all the positions within the department. The new staff includes Kyle Fragel, who started on February 22nd as a skilled worker. Todd Bercier started on February 22nd as well as a skilled worker. And John Colin Rosario started on March 29th as Monday this week as a skilled worker. So as of right now, we have a full department. But we have received in the last week a couple resignations, some people moving on to, I guess, better pastures, doing different things. But I will give you an update at our next meeting on those positions, okay? Moving on, our FY 22 capital planning is currently under review. I will be contacting the board at our next meeting on what has been recommended to the town council. Other than that, we have our 2020 annual statistical report that was completed on March 17th. This is for all our water related items such as total water use, for commercial, industrial, institutional, municipal, and residential for the year, along with our backflow connection program in our updated emergency response plan. So if you guys would like a copy of that, did I send that to you or not? I don't recall.
Yes, you did.
I did. So that was completed and you guys have a copy, so that's good. Other than that, I have nothing else to report. If you guys have any questions, concerns with anything so far?
Sounds good. Phil or Tom, you guys got anything?
I'm good, thank you.
I'm good, Bill.
Okay, on another note, I wanted to mention too, we are going to try to hire, given the circumstances, at least 2 summer or seasonal employees this year. We're going to see how that works out. And hire more if we can support that, just to throw it out there to everybody, okay? Okay.
All right, I guess we're moving right along. We'll head into the review of the draft fiscal year 2022 rates and fees.
Okay, I'm going to share the screen with you guys. So this is my first time, so please be patient. And we will go through the review process page by page. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
All right, good. So here's obviously the Department of Public Works rates and fees. Page 1. Next item obviously is the board where you sign the table of contents. The first page we have here is the surrounding communities, what they're paying for water and sewer rates. This does not reflect what they will be paying, obviously, for next year. This is their current rates. I haven't gotten updated figures on other surrounding communities as of yet. They may be doing the same thing as we are, keeping the rates flat given the circumstances.
Hey, Bruce, I only have one quick question.
Sure.
The Long Meadow rate on the Soar,
Yep.
you have any idea why it's that low?
I can let Mr. Vashon answer that because we've been talking about it just before the meeting.
Bill, we have 17 pump stations in East Long Meadow. And it takes a lot of maintenance, a lot of money to maintain. Long Meadow doesn't have nearly the amount of infrastructure we have. They can
Okay.
afford to keep their rates lower.
Okay, I just want to get some idea, because you use it as a comparison,
Yeah, it's just like I said, it's, I just use this so you guys are familiar what's happening around us. Okay, any other questions on the comparison sheet for the other surrounding communities?
I think it's a great comparison too for just the public to see, where we stand. I think we're right on line with what the surrounding communities are doing, if not a little bit better overall. So I think whatever you guys are doing is working. So
Excellent. Good. All right, our next sheet is the example of a rate change. I put in incremental changes just because I know I sent you an email thinking we keep the rates flat, but that's just your typical rate change on what 5 cents in water would equal. And that would be $3.80 added to your average bill. And then the higher consumption individual would be paying $5.40 extra a year for a 5 cent increase. Under the 10-cent increase, if we were to do that under the water, it'd be $7.60 a year. And for a higher consumption person from 76 gallons to 108 would be $10.80. Under a 15-cent increase would be roughly $11.40. And then a higher user with 108 cubic feet would be $16.20. Under the sewer side, a 10-cent increase would average the person, typically a residential person, would be $6 a year. And for a higher use person would be $9 per year. Under a 15-cent increase would be $9 on the low side for the average person or the average household. And then a higher use household would be $13.50. Last but not least, a 20-cent increase would equate to the average household $12 per year. And then a higher use residential person would be $18 per year. Any questions?
I'm all set.
Okay.
No,
Okay, so the next slides you see here, these are just informational slides. I try to keep these up to date with you guys every year. It hasn't changed much since last year. So this is our purchase expenditure for Springfield Water and Sewer. You can see our gallons of use is going a little bit higher, and our expended is actually going a little bit lower.
Why is that, Bruce?
Well, we don't have the true effect of 2021 yet.
Okay,
So I'm sure next year you're going to see a difference in the, I just don't have all the information yet. Okay. Next slide would be the water and sewer division. This is for both, obviously based on expenditure through the years. So you can see we're actually from 2019 to 2020, we're on a downward trend. And like I said, once we get 2021's or FY21's numbers, I'm sure that's going to change considerably.
I have a quick question for you, Bruce.
Sure.
On the sewer bill for Springfield, is that metered or is that based on water consumption?
It's based on meters and estimated based on our flows at Vineland.
Okay,
Yep. And this is, well, like I said, this is why we're trying to get these meter pits installed to confirm those findings as well. So that's our plan moving forward. Okay. Our next slide is the sewer division. 2020, we went down considerably from 2019, roughly from 770,000 down to about 650. But we know Once I get next year's data, that will change. So we'll see, I'm sure, a nice sharp spike in that. Okay, moving right along. Water rate increase. So with a 0% increase, we have a starting balance from FY 20 of 149. Whoops, sorry, excuse me. So we're in FY 22. So this is my projected rates. You can see, I don't know, can you see my mouse?
Yes.
All right, so this is FY 2021 projections, but I'm taking my estimates based on the ending balance for FY 21 to be $1,642,730.45. So that will be our starting balance for FY 22. Our anticipated revenue with no increase would be $3,207,600. Our FY 22 operational budget and expenses equals $2,228,465.30. Then we have a transfer from undesignated fund for $150,000. And then our long-term debt and interest for FY 22 is $849,925.38. That leaves us an anticipated ending balance of $1,621,939.77. Any questions?
Extremely high reserve
Yes.
at this point, Bruce. Bruce, quick question though. You put down the additional capital items
Yep.
in that 849. Are those the ones that are going in to be approved right now, or?
Yes, I actually, Phil, I did not put those into this year's numbers.
Oh, you didn't? I thought you did.
I was going to, but I kept them out, not knowing the status of those projects.
So the 849 could be higher.
Yeah, so if you see the little box down in the corner right here, that little gray box. So I put the two projects together and put a 20-year bond on that, and that would equate to about $36,318. And that would be minus off the FY 22 totals. So that would reduce that down, or we can increase the long-term debt and interest. So you take about $36,318 off of that.
And the 23 and 24 debt are not solidified either then?
No.
Those are projected numbers based upon some guesses for future capital expenditures, I would assume?
Well, yes, because if you looked at that sheet I sent you with the long-term debt and interest, the projections,
Yes.
there's a few items on there that have not been bonded yet. Okay.
Right.
So I didn't take what's on this sheet and incorporate that into the FY 2023 yet. You can see I put 892,000 in there.
Yes, because the sheet that you sent us was dropping down to 500,000.
Right. But, right.
And so I expected that to increase those numbers $300,000 above your sheet. There's some type of projections that you had in mind for future capital expenditures?
Well, absolutely. We currently have 4 projects right now under the water division that currently haven't been bonded. So I'm waiting to see what those come in at. So we have the pump station communications for 113,000 that has not been bonded yet. We have the water meters that have not been bonded yet for 131,136. And we have replaced truck number 4 for 260,522 that has not been bonded as well. So therefore, I keep those numbers, like I said, I typically in my formula, Phil, for projecting these rates, I typically just add a 4% in there as a marker. You can see it went up to 892 for FY 23.
Right. Another quick question, Bruce. When I looked at, looked at your debt schedule that you sent us,
Yep.
is there different terms on different items being bonded? It seems to be that way.
Yes.
It would be nice on that worksheet if you put down the term as part of the left-handed items agenda,
Sure.
and some idea, do they have a classification of saying, okay, all trucks will be 20 years or 10 years? Is there a definition defined already? What the term would be if on the different types of items being bonded?
I think that's in the chief financial officer's hand. I'm sure there is some type of system they use for bonding certain
Yeah.
projects.
In other words, anything like a truck would be 5 years or 10 years, and maybe a larger project, $1 million might be 20 years. I just like to know what's defined by their rules, to get an idea, because it looks like our long-term debt really drops off in a couple of years in either the water or the sewer,
Right. Keep this in mind as well, Phil. I don't want to reduce it too much. We can maybe use some of this extra cash to actually go out and actually purchase versus bond something.
I could understand that, but that's up to the board to make those decisions to some degree. My whole point was a couple years ago, we talked about creating a $1 million reserve, if you remember.
Yes.
And we're well within that number.
Yes.
That's my whole point. And if you think that number should be higher, I just like to know the reasons why.
Okay.
That's all, Bruce.
Okay. Any other questions?
I'm all set.
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Bruce.
Yeah, you got it. Do you want me to go through the 5-cent increase for the board? Just
No.
Because we're planning on keeping the rates level, so I don't think we need to.
okay. That's for your information. Okay. In the public, if they want to see. So if we did a 5-cent increase, there's a sheet there showing that. Then on your next page, you can see our operational budget for the water fund. Okay. All right, moving right along. For our sewer enterprise fund, our rates table sheet. For FY 22, we have a starting balance of $641,340.63. We have anticipated revenue at $3.70 per 100 cubic feet, at $2,338,400. Our operational expenses for FY 22, $1,802,036.62. We have a transfer from undesignated FY 21 for $150,000. We also have our long-term debt and interest for our sewer enterprise fund for FY 22, which equates to $491,235.22, with an anticipated ended balance of $536,468.79. Any questions?
Nope.
No? Everybody good?
All set.
Okay. You can see on your next slide here, if you were inclined to look at a 5-cent increase with all the numbers being said for FY 22, which wouldn't change except the rate to 375, your anticipated ending balance would be $568,068. Okay. Our next sheet is the operational expenditures for FY 22 for our sewer division. Okay. No questions. We can move right into the stormwater. Oh, All right. Under stormwater, there's no real significant changes under any division except for the 900s. And I will let Mr. Christensen, if you guys have any questions about the stormwater fees, he's been working diligently with Judy Pichetta and Mike Ray, our GIS specialist, getting this information in front of you this evening. So anyways, any questions about the stormwater?
So there was no changes to any of these rates, right? Or
So
fees.
Bruce, if I may, Bruce, thank you for bringing up Judy and Mike. They really have been working pretty much the last 3 months getting this together. So nothing changed from the standpoint of what the rates structure was. Unfortunately, this was almost the second year in a row that we started over. So there was a lot of weeding things out again. The easiest way to do this, as you know, was the land use code from the assessor's office. Unfortunately, almost, I don't want to say all, but a large portion of parcels needed to be looked at again, whether that was prompted by Judy in the billing department or prompted by phone calls from residents and or business owners. And that being, if you had a home that just happened to be in a business zone, you know, the bill would pump out and you would get charged the commercial rate, which obviously is not fair. That's not the point of this whole thing. So those had to be manually changed to the residential rate. The other thing was that we had to weed through was the exempt parcels. You guys got a little taste of that when Billings Hill Cemetery was on our agenda, I don't know, last meeting or a couple meetings ago. And that was sort of a clarification, you know, reading through the enterprise fund bylaw. Exempt parcels are not exempt from utilities, which obviously this is. So we had to sort of pull out take a look at the 900s individually, which there were quite a few, and sort of make sure everybody was paying the proper amount based on what was fair and what we thought the intent of the bylaw was. So parcels that had a land use code that was not indicative of the use on the actual site, those things got changed. And then some of the exempt parcels that had a large amount of impervious area got bumped into that category where we were actually charging for impervious area, which is what every other parcel in town is doing. So other than that, I think we got pretty much everything squared away based on, like I said, what the intent of the bylaw was.
I have a question. Tom,
Yep.
did you guys look at the 962V classification?
Yep.
Was there any changes done in that by the assessor's office or?
So again, we have a different outlook than the assessor's office, right? We're looking at from a stormwater utility standpoint, and that is more of an impervious area thing. So the V designation in the assessor's office stands for vacant, which means there's no building. That doesn't mean anything to us. If a parcel is 100% parking lot, it's still classified vacant in the assessor's office. And from a stormwater standpoint, that couldn't be more opposite. So yes, we've looked at all those 900s, and regardless of land use code and how it's interpreted by the assessor's office, we're interpreting it through impervious coverage.
Let me revise the question then. Are all the cemeteries in the same land use code?
I want to say yes.
Is there anything
Um,
else in that same code as the cemeteries?
I don't know all the land use codes and all the property designations, Phil. There's a lot of them.
Yeah, I
I've
know
been
that.
through a lot of them, but
I know.
this was our chat. We have probably 40 parcels that Judy is updating manually because we can't change the land use code to a specific fee because it'll incorporate other parcels that yes, they have the same land use code, but they don't have the same land use. So we have to go in and change them manually to correctly, show what's going on the site. I don't know if that answers your question or not. Where's your question driving?
Well, if we're basing everything on land use code, I mean, a cemetery's land use is basically a cemetery with some little driveways to it overall, and I was just wondering why they had a separate land use code with the majority of the cemeteries in it, except for a couple other items in that same land use code.
They very well all may be the same land use code, but they still have impervious area. That's what we're basing the whole idea on.
Okay.
I guess what I'm saying is, are you getting at, you want to remove that land use code from the fee schedule?
No,
Okay.
what I want to do is understand that if all the cemeteries are in one land use code with nothing else in it, we could assign a value of 0 fee to that land use code.
Okay.
That's
Well,
what I'm getting at.
if that's your pleasure, there's not that many of them. We can just assign that parcel 0 fee.
If that's the case, that's what I would like to do.
Because if there's a half a dozen of them, it's a question of Mike Ray going in and changing the computer code, or Judy changing 6 individual bills. It's probably going to be about the same time in our office. So if that's what you're driving at, then obviously, that's your prerogative, and that can be a suggestion. Making that a possibility from a operational standpoint, I mean, we could do that in no time.
Okay. I'm not sure how Bill and Tom feel about that. Just questioning if you guys have any comments on that.
Yeah, I mean, cemeteries are kind of unique, I guess. I don't know. Does it open the door to other entities coming in saying, we're a nonprofit, or, we have limited funding and we can't afford this either. I just don't know if it opens the door. And I know we had kind of had that conversation. I guess maybe a review of what the fees are for those cemeteries might be prudent to see what they actually are. Is it only $25 or is it more wherever
Yeah,
they're from?
it's a flat fee.
It's a flat
I mean,
$25.
Nobody gets to the point where they're into over an acre of impervious, obviously. So
Right. So, I
It's
mean,
a flat-
$25 a year. I don't know. Is it worth the aggravation of opening the door? It's just,
Yeah, through the chair. Tom, do you know how many cemeteries there are? Is there like 4 or 5?
yeah, it's half a dozen at most, I think.
So, and that's up for discussion, and it's up to Phil and Bill, the board, to discuss or make a motion to do something and see how it plays out. It's whatever your pleasure is, Bill.
Tom O'Brien, what are your thoughts on it?
I think it's good the way it is.
Phil, do you want to make a motion, Phil, or do you want to just leave it as is? We can have some more discussion on it. We can table it.
Well, it would depend on how you, what your thoughts are on it, Bill, at this point, before I make a motion.
You know, I'm inclined to leave it as is for now. I don't think $25 is completely, you know, unreasonable. You know, they do have some civic responsibility to the community too, right? With their surfaces and their cemeteries. I don't know how much actual paved surfaces are in their cemeteries. You know, if they could prove to us that, I don't know, maybe we could make some exception for a cemetery that has 0 paved surfaces, but I don't think that's the case for any of our cemeteries in town. I'm not so sure.
That I would just table it to further discussions later on then.
Okay, all right. So we'll table the discussion on that topic for the cemetery fees.
Through the chair, Bill,
Yes.
it seems like we only have one item, based on our draft rates and fees this evening. I mean, we could schedule another meeting, for more discussion on the stormwater. But I'm hearing really no opposition for our draft rates and fees, so, just something to put in your head if we wanted to table this and have another meeting, regarding rates and fees, and or you guys can vote on them this evening, just, something for thought anyways. Okay,
I had one more question. Just the vacant industrial land code there, the 440, 441, 442. That's only $25. Where do we have vacant industrial and what does that look like? It seems like, you know, you hear the term industrial, it sounds like it would be a lot of impervious surface.
Yeah, there is not, there aren't that many parcels that are vacant industrial. There are a few and none of them have impervious surface.
Okay, so
there's a couple at the end of Denslow before you get to Long Meadow. And then
Holy shit.
there's a couple on, is there one or two on Deer Park? There, yeah, it is what it they're there because it's a use code and you know, we've looked into both of those a handful and we actually got a call from a couple people that wondering why they were paying anything for a vacant parcel, but that's the way it is. It's the same argument as the residential rate.
okay. All right, fair enough.
Garden industrial or garden industrial?
I don't think that they make that designation in the land use code. That's our zoning.
Okay.
All right, I don't have any other discussion on the stormwater funding table, so I don't know if anybody else does, or we can, Bruce, do you want us to vote on this tonight, or do you want, or when do we have to vote on it by, I guess?
as soon as possible. Like I said, I can schedule another meeting for next week. That's all. Not a big deal.
I just prefer to vote on it tonight or hash it out tonight if you want to change it or.
It's just, we're gonna schedule another meeting to talk about one item, because I'm not changing anything else, but I don't want to tell the board how to, or tell you as the chair how to run the meeting, and if other board members want to have another meeting to discuss openly, that's all.
I'm good with voting on it tonight.
So am I, Bill.
All right, so there's no other changes you have to make to this, Bruce?
No, but I'll go through the rest of the packet just so the public can see it and you guys can,
Yeah, so let's finish going through it and then we can make a vote on it at the end.
if you guys are comfortable only. I don't want to force you into anything, okay?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think if that was the only hangup was the cemetery fee, I think everybody's, you know, comfortable voting on it and
Okay.
we can do that at the end of the review here.
Okay, all right. So our next page on your screen here is the stormwater operational account or the budget submittal. So that reflects the total dollar figure for our projected revenue under stormwater and all the expenses that go with it. Next sheet is our water services for 2021 to 2022 for all the associated water fees. This would be entrance fees, inspections, Service installations, water service, hydro testing, tapping meters, everything under the sun. There is no changes for any fees for this upcoming fiscal year. Any questions?
Any major concerns with these fees? You hear any feedback from the community?
Actually, no, we've added a bunch, I believe last year with all the camera and things like that. I don't know if Felix can speak to this at all. He's our water and sewer administrator. If people have been taking advantage of these new services we're offering residents.
Actually, not much camera use from private,
All right,
and I've heard no complaints
okay,
about the
Okay, good.
fees.
All right, great.
good, awesome. All right. On to our next sanitary sewer services for FY '22. No changes on that. This is for sewer connection, inspection fees, cammering of said pipes, sewer blocks, vacuum testing, air testing, and other inspections related to sewer. But like I said, there are no increases or deviation from last year's fees. Questions?
No.
Felix, have you seen any increased fees in this area at all? Or kind of the same as the water division? Not much change?
No,
Increased revenue or anything? No. Okay. Okay. Our next sheet is our stormwater services. No changes from last year as well. The upper portion of this is for mainly for developers, permit to open public way, drain layers, licenses, stormwater entrance fees, connection and inspections. Also stormwater connections license per dwelling, inspections fees per dwelling under the subdivision rules or subdivision portion of this is stormwater connection license per dwelling, inspections fees per dwelling, cammering the system. So this is one of those things before we accept any subdivision, we camera the whole system. Also vacuum testing, air testing of stormwater manholes, inspection of stormwater manholes and inverts, stormwater tie-ins, cammering over 500 linear feet to less than 500 feet, and a smaller push camera for those smaller jobs. But no differences on the stormwater. Questions? No? All right, moving right along to other services. Like I said previously, it's pretty straightforward, not much on this. No changes from last year. Questions? No?
Good.
Next item, our life cycle maintenance fees. So it's actually a one pager. Nothing changed from last year. I'm not sure. Tom is actually the one that put this document together. Try to increase revenue for us. Tom, have you seen any uptick in this life cycle maintenance fee at all this year or this past year?
No, I think with the pandemic, it probably went down. Actually, I don't remember doing a whole lot of calculations for life cycle maintenance.
I don't either. Excellent. Okay, next item is our East Long Meadow Transfer Station. We did not increase any fees in this area, but as you guys can see that we did add to this list is the wood chips for $10 a truckload. We have compost for $20 a truckload and loam for $25 a truckload that is available at our transfer station as we speak now. So it's a good way to obviously increase revenue there. We'll see how it plays out this year because I know over the past year we did try to incorporate this into an enterprise fund, but we just didn't see the revenue getting us there yet. So I think we're on the road to a good system up there. We just have to increase try to increase our revenue, maybe with public education and outreach, and maybe some other things that'll come down the road. So please, please, if you guys have any suggestions, ideas, I'm all ears moving forward. So it'll be good to get a year under our belt and see how this plays out.
Hey, Bruce,
Yes.
are you limiting to 1 truckload per resident per week?
Per week, yes. And the
Do we-
only reason I'm doing that, Phil, just in case people are away, I'm worried about not having enough material for everybody. So I'm trying to limit it to 1 truckload per week. And we can change that at any time if we think it's necessary. It's just, this is first, it's just getting going. I don't want one person taking 10 truckloads in a weekend and not having enough for somebody else. So we can modify this and move it around as we see. fit.
I was gonna say, maybe 2.
Right,
I wouldn't limit it to just 1, even in the first year.
right.
2 might be a limitation, but
Okay.
why limit it to 1? If somebody knows about it and they want to use it, why not make it available if they're willing to pay,
Sure,
in its first year?
sure.
Why am I gonna limit my revenue?
Right. Gotcha.
I mean, when it's gone, it's gone.
Sure.
Then at least then we'll know.
Okay. Yeah,
But I'd rather not cap revenue based upon, people want to use more than 1 truck in a week.
okay, okay.
Because I'm not sure how much you're limiting on a truck.
Right, right.
1 yard, 2 yards,
Typically it's about 2 yards.
2 yards. I wouldn't limit to two trucks if it's 2 yards. Most people would get 4 or 5 yards if they're gonna buy something,
Okay. You make a motion?
I make a motion to change the pickup to at least 2 in a week rather than 1.
Right here, second, Tom.
Second,
All right, all in favor? Phil,
Yes.
Tom,
aye.
and I'm also an aye.
Okay, I will make those changes. Anything else, Phil, or no? Good?
No, that's it.
Okay. So we're down to the last page on your sheet. It's our transfer station electronic disposal charges for FY '22. No changes there. All right. That concludes my rates and fees for FY '22.
I guess we got a chance to vote on this now, right, Bruce? That was everything.
That's your pleasure. Absolutely. If not, we can schedule a meeting next week.
All right, well, I'll take a motion to accept the proposed rates and fees for fiscal year 2022 as presented by Mr. Fenny. So I'll hear that motion now if anybody's willing to make it.
So moved.
All right, seconded.
I'll second it.
All right, all in favor, Phil,
Yes.
Tom,
Aye.
and I'm also an aye. Okay, so motion's moved. The proposed rates and fees has been approved.
Excellent.
And just make sure, I said as presented, just to make sure that one adjustment's made to the transfer station change that we voted on.
Yep, you got it. And then what I will do, if somebody, well, I will send out the signatory sheet to you, Bill, first. You can sign it. Can you scan it and send it?
I can give it to Tom at work, so I can just pass it off to Tom.
Okay, and then we'll get it to Phil for his signature and
Okay, let me know, Bruce. I'll just come down and sign it.
excellent. Thank you, Phil.
Okay, now we have other business.
Yes, so under other business, I am pleased to present Michael Schrader from Tigan Bond. He is an outside consultant. I actually invited in to review our rates and fees and our structure moving forward. He has some great ideas. So I'm gonna leave it up to Mike. He can do his little slideshow here, and we can see what he has come up with so far.
I don't know. That's a pretty tough leave. I don't want to go after that. That's how you get it done. I like the way you guys roll.
Nice.
So, yeah. So like, let me show you what we're doing and what we've done. And, you know, Bruce, we still have a few things to iron out, a couple questions and things. But what I can do is show, you know, the process and the methodology. And then also, just to share with the board is we do this, yeah, I guess I can say all the time. This is my primary, or has become my primary project over the last couple of years. And the difference is with East Longmeadow, with Bruce particularly, is he's a very much a hands-on person. So what we're doing is not just providing a service, but we're bringing him in. Let me share. The host is disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh, well, how can, hold on.
I think you got to make him a co-host potentially, Bruce. I'm not sure.
Optimize. I don't know how I can do this. Let me see.
And not to mess with you, Bruce, but there's someone on your porch.
There's somebody in the window.
Yeah. I like to do that to guys that are in their basement or something. Like, who's that walking around behind you?
What do I make you, a co-host, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Make
And your
co-host.
pizza's getting cold. I'm just
Oh,
gonna say it.
pizza guy.
All right.
Good.
So anyway, what I was going to say is normally we develop this model and deliver it, you know, with handouts and a memo and that kind of stuff. And what we've decided to do together is that we're going to work with Bruce, kind of like he's on our team, to understand the model and how to use it for two purposes. One is you don't have to pay us next year to update it. And two, you know, professionally or personally, I should say, I look forward to getting some better feedback on how I can make this more useful to utility managers, because, you know, it's designed for what we do. And I want it to be more usable for what you guys do, especially the big test, Bruce, will be using it to develop your budget next year. And so that's exciting for me. It probably doesn't sound that exciting, but I welcome having a client really in the model with us, because we could both grow and that kind of stuff. So anyway, what we do is we develop this rate model, financial rate model, and it's really the same as what Bruce has been doing largely. It's probably a couple differences. The primary difference between the way we do this and the way, and I'm not sure about you, Bruce, but we don't project revenue. We project usage and then calculate revenue, and then calibrate by checking back with committed revenue, just to sort of calibrate ourselves. And then we've got some functions in here that are, you know, this is the capital improvement model or module. And it's pretty well developed to be flexible, because this is usually the driver for rates with any system, and you're no different. So we want to make sure we have plenty of flexibility to, you know, move stuff around and vary how we pay. I heard some discussions around that. And sir, the gentleman who asked the discussion about terms for bonding, I am 100% transparent, you guys, just so you know. I don't front, you know, I just learned this recently, that there are statutory limits for debt. And I knew they were loosely based on asset life, but there's some specific ones. And Bruce, I will make a note to send that to you
Yeah, that's
because it's interesting. You know, I learned something every meeting I have, and that was interesting. And what's more interesting is the way the bond councils look at it. You know, the example I saw, they had a water tank characterized as equipment, and with a, you know, like a 10-year debt limit on it. And I'm like, yeah, it's going to be a really expensive water tank if you do it that way. So it's a good example of, and this whole process is an example of operations, engineering, usage, customers, and it kind of all comes together. And I think you find that it's a good way to go. The other thing I'll say before we get in the weeds is this is intended to be very transparent, and that it's based on a fully informed, data-driven, transparent decision-making process for the board. Now, how you actually present it and go public with it and all that stuff, it varies from community to community, how you show, but this is how we develop rates. And as we developed our rate model, we would have circumstances that I'm sure are pretty easy to understand, where we develop, okay, this is what we think. And you have somebody say, well, what about this? And what if we try that? What if we look at that? And it happened so many times that we modified our model to include 3 different rate structures. So each one of these figures is a pro forma, which is just the combination of your expenses and your revenues. And just in basics here, the expenses, and I'm sorry, I'm going to jump around a little bit here, are at the top. So these are your operating expenses. For any accountants or finance people, I do include debt service here, which is technically not operating, but it keeps all of the stuff that you're used to seeing up top. And then we can just focus on capital, which is pay-go, meaning out of your reserve. I heard the gentleman commented that the reserve was pretty healthy, and we can take advantage of that. And then new debt service. So, when you're dealing with a board, and this is a little bit different because it's, we're all talking about this together, is you can see, okay, this is what we've been doing every year, and how does that track? And then these are new projects that we need to fund. So that's consistent for the 3 alternatives, because that's what you need to do. Or in other words, that's what they call the revenue needs. So that's how much you need to raise. And then we've looked at 3 different ways to do that using different water rate strategies. And currently, I won't go too much in the weeds, even though I just said that. So, and I can't, the only person I can see is Bruce. So Bruce, give me the high sign if I need to stop, or if anybody just makes a noise, I'll stop. What you have now is just a consumption charge. There's a minimum charge if you don't use more than 10 units, but other than that, it's just one flat structure. And understand that any rate structure can work. As long as you recover the amount of money that you need, it can work. What we find is that as you get into either needing to raise the revenue to complete more projects or whatnot, because your expenses change, then as you need to put more pressure on that rate structure, if there's any sort of inequities in it, they'll start to come out. And also the one size fits all, which is what you have now, it doesn't always work as well as some other structures can for a diverse group of users. So you have on the one side the I say this so often, they're like in my head, but the little old lady that makes a cup of tea a day, she's not using hardly any water. We don't want to hit her harder than we have to. But then you have other customers that are using quite a bit of water. So you want to try to balance between the high users and the low users. Although I will say, Bruce, I was looking at your data while you guys were talking. They're fairly heavy water users in East Longmeadow.
Right. And this is this is what I'm trying. Well, this is what I was going to explain to the board maybe next year early on, Mike is putting together also a tiered rate structure for us as part of this model. So this, like he said a couple minutes ago, that we can actually increase our revenue by obviously putting the burden on the people that use the most water. So increase their rates accordingly. So, and I don't mean to steal your thunder, Mike, but.
No, you do a good job. So yeah, and there's two concepts that we're going to talk about a little bit. One is the readiness to serve. And, you know, I think about that when I think right now, today's probably a safe day still. Really, nobody's using outside water. So, you know, the guys at the water, well, you guys buy all your water, but it's less, there's not as much demand, right? It's a low demand day. So if you were making water, I would usually say, you know, the guys are going home at 3 o'clock. When you get up to, you know, Memorial Day or 4th of July weekend, everybody's going, especially if it's a dry year. And they may be, you know, working late just to fill the water tank, so to speak. And even though you're a secondary system and you're buying your water, there's still the concept that the bigger a service size is that a customer has, the more they can impact you. So, you know, if somebody has a 6-inch water service, or that's probably a fire service, you know, that could put a sudden and big demand on your system. So this concept is that people pay, or the customers pay, in this case, a quarterly fee is based on the size of that service, because it's based on the potential impact. And your system is designed for peak flow, for maximum usage. So, you know, on a residential street, if you were just providing for potable use and showers and stuff, you could get away with a, you know, 1.5 or 2-inch pipe. But to provide for the fire service, we put in an 8-inch pipe. So it's that concept is the whole system is designed for, you know, sudden instantaneous peak flows. And this is just a method of apportioning some of the costs to those higher users. Now, in terms of, you know, I mentioned that this was transparent, and as part of my role, I expect to be questioned or challenged or, you know, whatnot. So we always think that way, like, well, you know, how do we defend this? How do we explain this? The American Water Works Association has what they call meter ratios, or meter equivalent ratios, and is basically a 4-inch water meter can put 25 times more than a 5/8 inch water. 5/8 inch water meter can. And that's, you know, because the area of a circle goes up by the square of the diameter. So that's why it goes up so fast. And you could justify using that multiplier in your base charges. What we're showing is a somewhat tempered approach. So instead of charging 25 times more for a 4-inch meter, we would charge 10 times more. And the other thing, and I didn't get the chance to see all your faces, but there's one gentleman in particular, sir, I can picture you asking questions about some of this. This whole model is designed for, well, what if we do this instead? You know, it's designed to ripple through backwards and forwards. And I can show you an example of that in a minute. So as a starting place, we've done that. We added a base charge that people pay in addition to their usage charge. And this whole vertical piece is what we call a rate structure. So these are all the bits and pieces that go into calculating the water bills, not including, you know, turnoffs and, you know, that kind of stuff. This is just straight up water bills. Then the next thing that we do, and this is just sort of a natural progression in terms of rate development and how rates are structured. The next thing that we look at is those same fixed charges, but now we look at adding tiered water use rates to that. So tiered is like the opposite of Costco. The more you buy, the more you pay per unit, which is entirely counterintuitive in everything except for water use, because you have a fixed, well, again, I'm sorry, it's a secondary system. Technically, you don't have Actually, I should ask Bruce, do you have a cap for what you can withdraw?
For in our enterprise funds, a cap,
No, I mean, for Springfield, for the amount of water, is
Yeah.
your agreement up to a certain amount?
yes, yes. Yeah, I don't have it. What is it? Do you know, Felix?
It's around 790 million gallons a year.
Okay.
Right, so,
There's a day volume as well.
well, I mean, you're at 690, so, so the purpose of these kind of rates is twofold. One is it does encourage water conservation. For anybody that's really into economics, that concept is price elasticity. Like, what does it take to make a change in people? Like, how much do you have to raise gas up a gallon before people start changing their behavior? And that's really tricky with water use, frankly. But what we do is we look at, if we have 3 tiers, how do we price them and how big do we size them? And I can show you that. One of the initial things I think is interesting, as you can see here, is because you didn't want to change, or you're going with a steady cost for FY22, even though we're showing FY22 rates here, we kept them the same. So your meter size, your standard meter size is 3/4. So I set that to the same price. And then what's interesting on the usage, instead of setting that first tier at 360 where it is now, we set it a little bit lower. And that's part of this concept, is by shifting cost to higher water users, it takes some of the pressure off the lower water users. And we could show you some examples of that. Does anyone have any questions? So hearing none, and I won't kill you guys and go through every single part of this, but oops. What I mentioned was using usage to predict revenue. We looked at your usage both in terms of metered usage, and currently we only have 1 year of metered usage in the under analysis. And I think, Bruce, we talked about getting a couple more.
Yes.
This is the annual statistical report data that you have to file every year. And it shows the last 10 years, and things tend to trend. It's really interesting that in Massachusetts, where I do most of this, people's water use is either going up, going down, or staying the same, which, that's, I think any data set would conform to that. The really crazy thing in Mass is that the people that are going up and the people that are going down, it's almost by the same amount. It's usually like 1.5%, 2% a year. And we look at that to see, well, what do we see for water use trends here? And this is sort of interesting, is that from 14 to 17, which had a couple of really dry years in here, it was going up like you'd expect. And then it really dropped down in 18 and 19. And we're still, frankly, the jury's a little bit out on 20, whether that's a real indicative point or whether it's just a abnormally low. These two lines are always a little bit apart anyway, because the data is drawn differently. But long story short, that's what we look at. So right now the model is based on that FY20 year of actual meter read data, and we're holding that steady. And whether or not we change that after is subject to what we find. And the reason why it's such a big deal is if you're one of those communities that's going down, 1.5% a year, your costs are going up 3% a year, say. It means that just every day sitting at your desk, you're losing 4.5% a year in, it's almost like inflation in revenue, if you will. So not only that, but when we look at raising rates, you have to overcome that declining revenue from usage. So on the other hand, if we overestimate usage, if it's really going down a little bit a year and we don't show that, then the implication is that the model will predict revenue that just never comes, which is a horrible place to be. Or if we look at it and say, wow, it's going down like 3% a year, the model's going to be screaming for really high rate increases, and then frankly, ain't nobody happy then. So we try to balance it, and with so many things in here, this is just it's a judgment call, and everything's a projection, and then every year you can check in on how do the projections go. So this gives you a very good year after year, and it's a long-term financial plan that, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that you change your behavior in terms of how you evaluate and review and approve rates, but it certainly gives Bruce a better indication of what's going on, what do we see happening, what happens if this, what happens if that, you know, what if I move this project out 2 years, what if I move it back? You know what, I'm just going to pay that out of my rate instead of debting it, that kind of thing.
I have a question for you, Mike.
Sure.
Go back to your charts of that usage. What's been your experience as far as what's driving usage up? Is it population growth or decrease, or is it weather related more as a percentage of usage? From your past experience, what are the variables that would affect that usage line in making projections for revenue?
So in general, water usage has been going down since call it the early 80s. And that was, gosh, I just realized, I don't know what drove that, but I think it was plumbing code and water conservation. And, you know, if you go into Home Depot right now and look at any toilet or whatever, it'll tell you how many gallons or how many liters per flush, that kind of thing. So we see that going down. And then loosely or just, you know, it's hard to actually pin an exact answer, but what I see is that if you have a community that's, I don't know, put it like undergoing gentrification, where there's big homes are being built around, you know, like a town could be like almost like a region, in that they'll have the downtown area will be densely populated with apartments over, you know, over retail, that kind of thing. But then as you get out, you'll have the more recent homes are out in the fringes of town, and they're bigger, have bigger yards, depending on what your population.
The reason why I'm saying is 60% of the single family homes in East Long Meadow are 60 years old.
Okay.
You know, so that's a pretty stable base as far as I would think. And then, so when you take that into consideration with the amount of construction that's going on in this town, whether it's industrial or single family homes, it's not, the projected growth of this town is pretty flat to some degree, you know? So when I look at that standpoint, I try to figure out why the usage would be going down, you know, 1 to 2% a year. It's going to be flattening out.
Oh, yeah. And ultimately, it'll all flatten out, right? So what you see with that is those 60-year-old houses, people renovate the bathroom, they put in a new toilet, or they, you know, just as appliances get replaced, they generally use less water than they did before. Family sizes are going down in general. I've heard stories of, you know, the school kids, the elementary school kids coming home and wagging their finger at mom and dad because they're letting the water run while they brush their teeth, because they've learned that in school, you know. So there's just more sensitivity towards water conservation in general. And the other thing I wanted to point out, that because we were talking about water use, this is that data that you report to the state, is your summer to winter ratio is 2, which is pretty high. You use 100% more water in the summer than you do in the winter. And that's that's about as high as I see it. You know, that indicates that there's a lot of, you know, a lot of irrigation and stuff like that, which, you know, it gives you a thought on charging more for that water. And Bruce, I don't remember if we talked about this. Do you guys allow irrigation or deduct meters? I
Yes.
think you said you did.
Yep.
There's two parts to that. One is excuse me. One is it's fair to people they're not paying sewer on what they water with, but the interesting part too is you get to see what's used for irrigation, because otherwise you're always guessing. I don't know, people washing their cars or whatever, is it a leak? But when it's irrigation meters, they'll trend the same and you'll get a better idea. So I'm a big fan of that.
Mike, you need that information, how many green meters we have and how much we use through the green meters? We can get that too as well.
Yeah, that would be interesting with the consumption data, because with the water side, it doesn't matter. We count it all, but it would be, if it's easily identifiable, that would be interesting to know, because I'd want to see how much of that is that 100%, of increase. And I'm debating right now. Part of me wants to show you the tier evaluation, and part of me wants to show the rest of this. Do you guys ever-
I got a quick question.
Sure.
Maybe it's not quick. So you mentioned that, as water consumption goes down, right, your rates have to go up to meet the capital demands, I guess. Do capital demands decrease over time if there's less consumption, or do those capital demands stay pretty consistent with the size of our system because it's fixed?
Unfortunately, well, two things that are sort of counterintuitive is that even though you're basically producing water, metered water is the stock and trade of the water industry. However, roughly 80% of your costs are fixed. It's not as, dependent as you think. And the second part is that I lovingly refer to it as a constant state of decay. Everything is just slowly falling apart. And water is not nearly as bad as wastewater in terms of just the operating environment, the harshness of it. We have some water infrastructure. I'm sure you guys have water mains that are over 100 years old and they're, still going. But, you see just a general need, things wear out. I don't know exactly how diligent the town has been in the past of replacing old infrastructure, but short end to a long answer is that it doesn't really change it. The only thing that would change it is if you were undergoing like big growth, like you wanted to attract a grow facility, for example. That's been a popular one, and they also happen to use a ton of water. And you had to, put a bigger water tank or expand your sources, then in that case, yes. But for the most part, capital's fairly consistent. And I guess, something to count your blessings on is, as a secondary system, you're not worried about detecting PFAS at your wells, next month. So that's there you go, Bruce. There's one thing you don't have to worry about.
Excellent.
And on the capital, actually, Bruce, this is one of the areas that we do want to go through a little bit more, is compare this to the asset management plan, and just we had the 20-year plan and we started going through that.
Yeah, and that does, like you said, some of that doesn't even include our vehicle replacement list and things like that. So this is why I was saying, based on our revenue, we can't keep bonding everything. We got to build up our reserves, and when we get to a certain point, is to either pay for, obviously, through PayGo on some of the projects per year. This will help our debt to income ratio and things like that. It's just something, like you said, based on this model, this is going to help me more so doing this projecting forward. So anyways.
Right. And we, just starting with your existing rate structure, your funding, and that's how I look at this, is you're funding this CIP. So there's two things that are changing, is projects that you need to do and your expenses that just go up. And I can show you how we trend the expenses in a minute. But we look at, these are the projects you need to do, and like everything else, it's when does it start, how much does it cost? And so for an example, we have this project in 26. If we went back to this, so that project is in there. If we decided to, let me see, right here, if we just said we were going to do that out of rate, out of PAYGO, oh, sorry, I didn't change the
term,
now you get this big giant hit there.
right?
And you could actually go another 3 years before you ran out of your reserve. So it's a balance of, you know, what do we want to use? How do we want to spend? You can spend down, you can build up if you have a big expense coming, which you really don't. You don't have anything crazy coming. And if, you know, to avoid, if you had that big bump coming, you could actually build up your reserve ahead of time so that you can spread that out and not hit people with a sudden rate increase like that would be. So, you know, my goal is, or our target, I should say, is a 20% fund balance, which and you guys call it the unallocated, it's also called retained earnings, that kind of thing. So when we mentioned that rate structure, we design that usually in that first year. You kind of play with the proportions of the different fees and whatnot, and from there, these percent increases are applied to every one of those line items in just to keep that balance at 20% or more, or, you know, more or less. So, you know, you can see here, you can play around and say, well, okay, yeah, 18, that's probably okay, but now I'm going to need you know, a 6 or a 7% here to get us back up. And, you know, so you just kind of iterate through it until it feels right. And that's maybe another surprising thing is it's not all carved in stone. It's these different rate structures and how you apply them is really based, and I get this out of one of my manuals. It's like what fits that community best in your needs and your situation. So you can look at this a bunch of different ways. And then no matter where you are, there's two truisms. Nobody considers themselves to be a rich town, no matter how rich they are. And everybody's worried about someone. And I jokingly refer to it as my mother, you know, like, why do we need to do this? How much does it cost? And what's it going to cost my mother? Because she's on a fixed income, that kind of thing. So the most important part of this is the annual cost to a residential user. And I noticed, Bruce, you had, would you have 80 and 100, I think, for usage. I use 50 gallons a day times 4 people a day, because that's the that's what they recommend for the affordability criteria. And that's about 9,600 cubic feet a year. And I think you had like 80 and 100 or 76 and 100.
6 and then 108, but that changed based on an annual statistical. I think we're up to 96 now based on the usage. So.
Well, and the other thing, when you look at financial impacts, which is what this tab does, is, you know, if you're using a ton of water and you're complaining about your water bill, the first thing you can do is use less water, you know, and that's just sort of that, you know, the commodity aspect of it is, you know, is very real. So the 50 gallons a day is low, but 4 people a house is generous. So, and you can, you know, move that up and down as you want to, but basically we look at, you know, going from, so FY22, for this, well, for the existing rates is $345 a year. And then they go up based on the different rate structures, impacts the different users differently. So under that modified base charge, that, which doesn't necessarily make sense to me. It looks like it's going up to 560 and then staying there. Yeah, there's got to be a glitch here somewhere. But anyway, we'll come back to you with the cost for that residential user under the 3 different alternatives that we're looking at, and do the best to balance, you know, the big users against the small users. And then down here, we look at the 2 financial indicators we look at, or financial burden indicators. One is based on the median household income, and it's the old saw in the water and sewer industry is 2% of median. It's not a great indicator. I only keep it because people are familiar with it. The more familiar one, or the more modern one, I should say, is the household burden indicator, which is based on the lowest quartile income. So it's the 20th percentile. And we look at that, and we look at what percent of your community is below the 200% poverty level, and use this table to come out there and blah, blah, blah. Long story short is this would have to be in the 10 range to be a high burden. So this is going to be, your rates don't, you guys are in good shape from a customer impact perspective, and I think even from a rate perspective. And like I said, we looked at, this is just your regular increase, keep what you got. We add in the base fees, and it looks a little bit differently. And then this is with tiered rates and base fees, but it's a little deceiving because that first year doesn't have a rate increase because we changed the structure. So that's what you see here is we'll kind of back into a rate increase based on that residential usage or something, because that FY22 it does change, or FY23 it will change. It's just hard to say because the whole structure changes, so it's not the same. It's not the same as just applying a number across the board. Did I just confuse everybody? Let me show you the.
I sort of liked your depth schedule of that's laid out as far as saying, okay, given these projects, I'm going to have a certain amount of depth level. And if you could levelize that, given the projects by sliding them in and out, if you know what they are or predict what they are, and in some cases, putting in what you think you should be doing in
Right.
those pro forma years.
Okay.
It would help you stabilize one portion of that analysis that says, other than my expenses, I could pretty level line my debt service to fit that analysis and then develop these rates
Exactly.
with all the games that you want to have here, or processes or methods. And to combine that with a base usage charge of a minimum charge, say, like you may say $35 or $60 if you use no water, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then you help those who have low volume usage
Right.
against those that have a high volume usage.
Correct.
But at the same time, taking into consideration the summer usage, as you were saying before, of the 2-to-1, would be very helpful in trying to derive a fair and equitable revenue stream.
Yeah. And that's, you know, what you look at. When I first started doing this, one of the my predecessors was really kind of hung up on balancing retiring debt with new debt. And I'll be honest with you, I love the idea, and this, so you guys are water commissioners, the water system floats off the water tank level, and that's what more or less governs the pressure. And the rate model floats off your retained earnings. And, you know, this, for example, is 49%. You could say, wow, that's kind of high. So we could say, you know what, we're gonna spend that down, and you could spend it even quicker if you lowered that first year. But then you got to come up to here and you need a much higher, like even 15% is not going to do it. You'd need to go something pretty drastic to get you back up where you need to be. So there's, in my opinion, it's okay to have that reserve if you're spending it down as you go. You know what I mean? It's a stabilizer for your rates. And we can, balance around with that. Even though this, I don't know, we could argue that could be lower quicker. And like I said, you'd have to have an adjustment. So it's you're balancing.
Well, there's two things I'd be looking at from a rate structure. It would be, it's one thing to balance the reserve, but there's other purpose of the reserve and trying to balance. Part of the purpose of the reserve is unanticipated expenditures that could be large.
Right.
Because of this type of service.
Correct.
And so I look at the reserve as not just a balancing of the butt of a rate,
Yeah.
as far as paying for capital, but also for unanticipated expenses that could be major.
Correct.
And so I need to cut that reserve between a portion being towards unanticipated major expenses
Yep.
in operating the department, and capital future expenditures to level the revenue stream or rate.
This is great. You guys are so engaged. I love it. So the 20% is a rule of thumb, and it's roughly 2 months income or revenue.
That's for the reserves, Mike. Sorry, I don't mean to
Yeah.
stop you. Is that typically what communities hold in the reserve based on what? All their assets, or I mean, how do you come up with that formula?
Well,
I know I'm talking with the board about this and trying to keep at least $1 million in the bank for unanticipated issues, concerns. So, like I said, I've been not flying blind for 4 years, but trying to come up with a scenario, like you said, balancing our long-term debt and interest, our reserve for unanticipated expenditures, and being able to loosen our debt load by obviously paying cash for some of these projects. So I don't, like you said, I don't know if there's a perfect equation that factors that into.
Well, first thing is there's 351 communities in Massachusetts, and there's 700 different ways of doing things. It's crazy. And honestly, I use the 20% is one of the indicators that you can use. There's also, and I have some white paper stuff on this if you guys are interested. There's one that's like I think it was like the single biggest asset, that to that point of something unexpected. There's a bunch of different ways you can look at it. So there's not one, MO. The 20% of operating, it sort of strikes a balance. It's not a crazy amount of money, and it, it's $1 million. So you could fix, you could either fix something, or, to be honest with you, if your water tank exploded, you could emergency borrow, as a community. So you can't, guard against everything, but it's a nice balance.
Sure.
And it, like I said, it gives you some float. And a lot of times I see you guys are in good shape. Sometimes, you'll be balancing a double-digit rate increase against dipping down to 8% reserves, and you get a little nervy there, but it's all independent. And that's why like I said, we show 3 different structures, is because it's so many times that people say, well, let's try this and let's try this. And let me show you this real quick. I think you might find it interesting. This is looking at your usage. And what we do to look at that is so obviously we've taken a lot of data from the town, and we use a tier structure that I call it's based on the serving size. And what that means is it's based on, where's my cheat sheet here? We use as a starting point, 1,000 cubic feet per quarter for first tier and 40 for a second tier. And that is roughly half of, it's roughly what a 50-gallon per day, 2-person household would use. And then the 4,000 cubic feet is based on a higher usage. So that's looking at, let's see, that would be 4 people per household. And, so it's not, so it's like right here, it's using a higher volume of water. And the reason why we use that is when you look at your actual water usage, these are the winter and the summer. My lines got a little messed up. So if we put the first tier at 10, ideally you'd capture about 50% of your bills. You guys use a little bit more water, so it's not quite that amount. And then the second tier going up to 40 is, you see it better in the summer. While you guys were talking, I was adjusting this. That's why the lines are off. So it's basically, this is the number of bills in the summer. They peak the most number of bills. The usage for that is around 20. And then as you go down, you see higher and higher use. And at the end, you get the bump of the really high users. So what we do is this first tier is the lowest, the cheapest. Then the second tier is in the middle, and it's what we call discretionary water use if it's a house. And then, the third tier is, I don't want to say excessive water use, but high water use. And in the winter time, looking at the same thing, everybody's usage is less in the winter. So we're capturing slightly more in the winter time for that first tier. And then the second tier, we're capturing just about all of it because there really is no, extremely high water usage in the winter, which also gives some nature as to your non-residential use. If you had, factories or, breweries or stuff like that, that would still be a higher number. So what we do is we go back and reconfigure based on this here. We calculate, if you had those tiers in place, what would it look like and what would the totals be for that? And we summarize that for the 3 tiers and put that into the model and then project that. So this is if you think of increasing block water rates as a step, the first component of that is the volume of water. And then the second component is how much the price increment is. So jumping back to here, we're starting conservatively with a tier 3 that's only 20% higher than tier 1. And there's 2 ways you can do that. You can say, that's fine. We're making the money we need. That's okay. Or you could say, we'd like to get much higher, but we're going to do it over a couple of years. But just as an example, if we change this to 1.5 and go back to that, this dashboard, you can see, look how high that reserves went. So we don't need, if that was the case, if you're going to charge proportionally more for that third tier, you can lower the cost of your first tier. And that's some of that iteration that we're talking about. So in that case, we could, I don't know, see if that, so you could, you start to get a sense for where do you want to put it? And an enterprise, I should have said this in the beginning, is mathematically, it's a zero-sum game. So if one class of customer or customer is going to pay less, someone else has to pay more. And that's what you're doing. You're just balancing that. So it's kind of like the waterbed model. If you push down here, it goes up there. So that, I just kind of went through a lot. I don't want to kill your evening. Bruce is already reheating his pizza, but
Second viewing, so it's a little easier to digest anyways.
yeah,
So basically, your tiering group is spreading out your operating expenses to the higher users than the lower users. Essentially, that's what the model does.
but it's not just operating, it's all expenses.
It's all expenses, but the majority of the bill is the water costs and which is the expenses.
Yep.
To the higher user versus the lower user.
Correct. That's actually a good point. The expenses, yeah, I mean, there's your cost to Springfield for, that's both usage and capital. It's almost half of your total.
Exactly. But
And this is where I hope to, Bruce, that you're using it next year is, setting your budgets for the year forward. We're looking at what has the change been over the last 4 years, over the last 3, or sometimes we do 2. What is the turnbacks? What do your escalators look like? And I hope that you can, it'd be similar to the way you set your budgets now.
It is, and I do basically the same thing as you do based on the percentages. I try to compare operating budget expenses, but like you said, this year, and I'm under water or under sewer alone, we went 10.91% this year in operating expenses from last year. So this is going to be a great model to use moving forward, just because, like I said, some of these unforeseen things are just, it's hard to calculate sometimes. And I build in between 4 and 5% per year, depending on if it's debt or operating expenses, things like that. So this model is going to help considerably.
Yeah. No, it's fun. I always tell people it's going to be fun. And
Yeah,
Bruce and I are the only one having fun, but
I do. I love doing this stuff. So anyway,
I think it's, I like the idea of the tiered model. It's really an interesting concept, and it's, I'm glad that we're thinking about looking at that. So I think it's a capitalist society, right? So pay for what you use.
yeah. So
yeah, and there's a whole, I don't know what any of you guys do for work, but as an engineer, I had to take one economics class. I thought it was really boring, and now I think it's fascinating. It's, a lot to it.
Excellent, Mike. Thank you very much, Mike, for coming on this evening. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. I like I said, I like when I have these meetings and people say, wow, that was brutal. Whatever. That's a lot of, I'm like, no, it was great. They're engaged. They're asking good questions. I don't mind getting challenged. I mean, this is what you're charged to do, is to really give this a fair shake. And, so I'm always excited by a client that's engaged. So.
Good.
All right.
Thank you, Mike. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Schrader? No?
Hey, thank you very much. That was great.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
We'll be talking again.
See you, Mike.
Thank you,
Thanks.
gentlemen. Good night.
Mike. Okay,
thanks, Bruce.
you got it.
Hey, is there any other business?
I have none.
All right, hearing none. Next item on the agenda is to schedule the next meeting. Bruce, we're just gonna handle it like we normally do through email.
Absolutely.
Okay, then at this time, I'll take a motion to close the Board of Public Works meeting for March 30th.
I'll make a motion to close the board meeting for March 30th.
All right, do I hear a second?
Second,
All right, all in favor, Phil,
Yes.
Tom,
Aye.
and I am also an aye. All right, meeting adjourned at 5:45.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night, gents. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.